Hello everyone. This game is from round 3, game 2 from the Fide World Cup. And I'm going to rotate the board here. This game is between GM Vladimir Kramnik with the white pieces and with the black pieces, fan favorite GM from the Ukraine, Vasily Ivanchuck. This game started out in the Caro-Kann. Again, Kramnik white pieces, Ivanchuck black pieces. D4, D5, and this is the exchange variation of the Caro-Kann. This is a variation Kramnik is familiar with. As a matter of fact, a few months ago in Dortmund, he played this game against German player Blue Bomb and actually lost the game. I'll just show that real quick. The knight c3, c3, queen e7, knight a3, a6, knight c2, knight f6, h3, e6, knight f3, and black really had no troubles at all in this variation. Black started to expand, which is Blue Bomb in this case, started to expand on the queen side, finishing the development of his pieces. Bishop g5, knight e4 by Blue Bomb, a4 by Kramnik, b takes, c4 trying to undermine the knight. The knight just simply snapped off the bishop. Knight d8 guarding the e6 and f7 squares. Knight e3, bishop f4, and the game was pretty much equal at this point. Kramnik had went on, wind up losing the game, not as a result of the opening per se, but it was just interesting that he went right back to the opening here. His main error right here was this move queen h5, which looked very enticing as there's all type of pressure put on the f7 pawn. There's some tactics here, excuse me, with knight takes e6 or even bishop takes e6. But Blue Bomb found a nice refutation. Bishop takes e3, rook takes, and then simply just snapped off the piece. There. And then after rook takes e6 check, right, which Kramnik was banking on, then the simple move king f8 happened. Okay. Even if knight takes e6, queen takes f7, king d8, knight takes e6, black is still alive, but this is definitely much more dangerous. So just stepping to the side, and then all of a sudden, white is just down material. And black just spends a few moves consolidating, and he went on to win the game in just 29 moves. Okay, so that sets the stage for the battle with Vasily Ivanchuck here. Now, before going to the game, I just want to show you from the white side, because if white is playing such a like drawerish type game, exchanging, not really getting nothing out of the opening, why would Kramnik play this opening? Well, again, exchange variation is very simple opening. It aims for a simple development and a king side initiative. That's the basic idea. I'm just gonna go run through this miniature with you to show you what it looks like when things go right according to white. Here's a game between Sir George Allen Thomas, one of the early strong British players, against Marcel Duchamp. And this game took place in Paris in 1929. So it was e4, c4, d5, e takes, c takes, bishop d3, knight c6, c3, knight f6, excuse me, knight e2, e5, d takes, knight takes, castles, knight takes d3, queen takes, queen d3. Isolated pawn shows up on board, bishop d6, knight g3, I in the f5 square, castle, bishop g5, bishop e6, knight f5. Black tries some tactics, bishop takes h2, king h1. Not king takes because of knight g4 check, king h1, bishop goes to c7, knight d2, bishop takes, queen takes, queen d6, threatening mate, g3, knight h5, knight f3, queen takes g3. Again, the idea is if pawn takes g3, the knight takes g3, there's a fork. Bishop e7 instead, g6, and now queen takes h5. If pawn takes, then the rook is coming over here. It's going to be mate soon. So queen f4, rook g1, rook fe8, bishop to g5, queen d6, queen h6, rook e4, bishop e3, f6, and rook g2, queen e7, and we see black valiantly trying to guard the king, rook ag1, and now queen f8, an attempted trade, and then rook takes g6. So again, that's just a real quick example of what white is trying to do in the position here. Here is another position from Scarborough 1930 with the white pieces was Mir Sultan Khan, a mysterious Indian grandmaster, versus female chess player Vera Menchik. And as you can see, again, the aggressive posture with the idea of attacking the king side for white. This game had ended with bishop g6, driving the queen away, rook takes f8, bishop takes f8, rook f1, bishop e7, and Sultan Khan played bishop h7, king h8, knight to f4, g5, knight g6, king g7, and knight takes e7. And that was all Menchik could take. Of course, if queen takes e7, then the queen will be coming to g6 to perform the last rites as it is mate shortly. Here is another position. It looks like the Sultan Khan position, right? Similar, same idea. This game was between Arpad Vaya and Jens Envelson, 1933. And here, game went bishop h7 check, king h8. There's that famous double bishop sacrifice. King h8, queen takes h6, rook takes f1, rook takes f1, bishop g5, rook f8 check. Okay, so with that in mind, now you have some good ammunition, background ammunition that'll help increase your understanding of the game ahead. Alright, now we're back to our original game. Thanks for your patience. But again, I try to consider like the beginning players too. And it's good to see what, the ideas behind the opening. And in this case, I just wanted to show you from the white perspective. Let me flip the board actually, so that you can see what what that opening is about. Because if you see like, oh, it's just a draw, you'll be like, man, why is the guy playing that? His ideas in the opening, it's just that over the course of time, if an opening's been played 100 years, the black player finds improvements and white looks for improvements as it goes back and forth. And then, you know, nowadays you get like an interesting game. Sometimes the players trying to come up with new ideas. Like, for instance, the Berlin defense was dead for a long time. The only player that really played it that was at Grandmaster level consistently was actually Art Bisquire. And nobody really knows this because his heyday was back in, you know, what, the 60s and stuff, 50s, 60s, you know? And he wasn't like a top GM in the world. So it was kind of like he was playing, he was holding up the banner for the Berlin defense, you know, but nobody really knew about that. But then Kramnik came along and resurrected it. So this opening looks dull or white and unambitious, but as you can see, it's very simple and straightforward. And white looks for attacking chances on the queen side, on the king side, excuse me. So again, Kramnik has the white pieces. Ivanchuck, who to me is the word genius is thrown around lightly, but he's definitely a genius in this subject, which is chess. Um, it's just interesting. His play, like you can tell when he's like on. I know we use those terms too a lot. The guy being on form or in form and off form, but it's like when he's on, man. It's like you could just pick him over anybody, whether it's Carlson, anybody, you know, anybody in the world. And then when he's off, he's like really off. You know, he like losing on time and stuff like that. You know, loses the lower rated, you know, international masters and stuff. You know, but today was one of those days for Ivanchuck. Let's see. So anyway, knight c6, c3. Now, of course, you're familiar with the basic plan of white. Bishop g4. I would have showed you some of black's ideas, but I didn't want to wind up making a long video. So already probably too long for some people who like little 10-minute clips. So anyway, speeding through. Bishop f4, bishop g4. Ivanchuck. Provocative move. Of course, white is getting invited to play the move f3. Okay, which would of course take the square away from the knight. So Kramnik simply dodges the whole scenario by playing queen b3, hitting the b7 pawn, which is natural because the bishop has just left the defense. So queen c8, knight d2, e6, and now knight g f3 to avoid double pawns. I forgot to mention too that sometimes in these variations white will castle queenside, but you can see that it's a little risky because you have an open c file for black and play can get really double edged. Bishop e7, castle, and now we can see that black has obtained nice development, right? He's gotten his bishop out of the pawn chain. He's exchanged his c pawn for an e pawn, and he looks forward to his queenside counterplay, whereas white is going to you know, traditionally play on the king side. So bishop g6, and we can see already black taking defensive measures to offset white's plan. Remember, I told you what white's main idea is this king side assault, and you can see with the bishop going to g4, h5, and now g4. Sorry, g4, h5, and now g6. You know, he wants to trade off the powerful bishop. And furthermore, notice black has not committed his king yet. He doesn't just castle over there, you know. So he's attacking the piece. So Kramnik has to do something, whether it's bishop b5, whether it's queen c2. He has to do something. Then queen c2 just loses a tempi. But Kramnik decides to ruin the black pawn structure over there. Takes g6, and you might be asking the question, well, why would he open up the h file for the black rook like this? You know, it looks kind of shaky at first, but when you think about it, it's highly unlikely that the black king is going to be safe over on the queen side. After all, you have this open diagonal from b8 to h2. The bishop is fortifying this pawn on h2, so it's not like there's going to be some kind of attack right there, because the knight and bishop and king are guarding this square. Again, the king is going to be unsafe over here on the queen side. You already have the queen here, bishop cutting through in the diagonal, and then the king also is going to wind up being unsafe in the middle of the board, as you already have a semi-open e-file. So Kramnik is betting that although the h-file has been opened and it seemed like black can benefit from that, Kramnik has looked deep into the position and seen that Ivanchuck really not going to be able to benefit off of this. And he plays h4 to boot. a6 and c4. And now it's getting dangerous in the center for the king as the position begins to be challenged to be pried open by Kramnik. a5, a3, and now a4. So Ivanchuck gains space on the queen side. Queen goes to d3. And now he just castles. And now c5. Now Kramnik decides to block off the queen side. And then he can have a free hand on the other side of the board. And also in the endgame, this is good to have. If he's able to get b4 in at one time and create this pass pawn situation of a 2-to-1 on the queen side. However, Ivanchuck gets the move, so he plays b6. So c takes b6. Queen takes b7. Bishop c7. So it is like a wild battle raging right now on the queen side. Knight d7. So to pile up against the pawn. Rook c1. Rook fc8. You have to watch these tactics here. If knight takes b6, then a simple tactic of just pinning and winning. Right? Right? The queen pins the knight on b6, and this knight is also on prise on c6. So for instance, if he takes there, then you take with the rook, hitting the queen, and then you're going to pick up the knight also. Sorry about that. So after queen a7, for example, then you can pick up the knight with either rook takes b6 or queen takes b6. So just winning material. This is why Ivanchuck couldn't rush to grab the pawn with knight takes b6. That would be an error. Instead, rook fc8, b4, getting rid of the weakness. So en passant, interesting time in the game here. So queen takes b3, bishop takes b3. So there is a pass pawn here, and it's either going to live or die. Rook c3, bishop goes to e7. And these dark square bishops in these type of positions are great defensive pieces for pieces that try to invade on the king side. Rook fc1. Now this guy being harassed. Knight b4. Good move. It's a defensive move and attacking move at the same time, as ideas like this are in the air. Forking the rooks. Knight e5. I think that's good for black, because black would love to just trade down some pieces, because black has the better pawn structure here. Okay, white's the one that has more weaknesses in the pawn structure. Matter of fact, black's pawn structure kind of reminds me of the Benoni. I'm sorry, like the Banco Gambit a little bit, in that all the pawns are like pretty much united over here, and this is like looks like a good ending if the game goes to an ending. I mean, if you could put this pawn here, you can really see what I'm talking about. Just a beautiful pawn structure, and then you have these open files on A, B, and C files. Only thorn right now on black side is this pawn, but with the move knight b4, it not only threatens in some lines to play this move, forking these two rooks, but also it blocks the queen defense, the queen's defense of the um, b6 pawn. So it's just a matter of getting the right tactical timing, because you don't want to take too early and then wind up losing material. So here Kramnik opts for this move, knight e5, and I don't see how this really helps his cause. The only reason I could see him playing that is because knight takes maybe knight takes b6. It would maybe give him some more counterplay. So again, the only purpose I could see of knight e5 is to dissuade, besides the obvious threat, but to dissuade black from playing this move knight b6, whereby Kramnik could generate counterplay. So for example, knight takes b6, bishop takes b6, rook takes c3, queen takes c3. So first we see the taking over by white of the c file, and then queen takes b6, and then just knight d f3, right, with powerful knights. And then white could probably even go for an endgame after queen c7, queen takes, and rook takes, with tremendous pressure on the king side. All right, even the pawn down, and those double pawns aren't helping at all. So this position, is definitely good for white. That's why it has some compensation for the deficit here, because those pawns are valueless. So Ivanchuck probably saw this position or something similar, and this is why he rejects this move, knight takes b5. He's not being a pawn grabber here. Instead, he plays knight takes e5. If and of course, in a perfect world, Kramnik would love to be able to play this move, but because it straightens out his pawns again. However, this move right here would just win the exchange. So therefore, after knight takes e5, right, Ivanchuck, bishop takes e5 is forced. Rook takes c3, queen takes c3, and now queen takes b6, and you have a similar scenario, except that the knight is missing from e5, and you had the bishop in its place. So white is still entertaining some attacking chances here. All right. Now, queen d8, queen b3, and now rook c8. And of course, Ivanchuck wants to get to an endgame. Rook a1, rook c4, and this part of the game is very instructive to me because of the way that the way that Ivanchuck starts piling up on the weaknesses, the position. White doesn't have too many glaring weaknesses, but this D pawn is isolated, and this is a big weakness. And right now, this pawn is a little bit weak, but the biggest one is this one on D4. Okay, it only can be defended by pieces. So, of course, Ivanchuck wants to grab that H4 pawn, but he can't right now because this knight would then be grabbed. So he plays rook C4. So he puts the rook here again. This makes sure a piece is committed to the defense of D4, and then now he's legitimately threatening to take here. So Kramnik has to play G3. Now Queen C8, and now notice and learn, this is how he uses threats. And any master, any strong player, use threats to to gain time to accomplish certain goals. So for instance, he used the threat against the H4 pawn to take over the C file. Okay, King G2. And now, excuse me, now Knight C6. Rook G3 was Rook C3 was a good move also. Knight C6. Queen, Queen B5. Bishop F8, good move. It's a good defensive situation there, right? Making sure the king is safe before continuing on. Rook A4. This is good for black. Rook takes, queen takes. Knight B4, just edging closer and closer to an ending where this isolated pawn is going to be highlighted as a weakness, because again, it only can be defended by pieces. So if you get rid of all of the pieces, then the only way that isolated pawn can be protected is by having the king stand right next to it, and that's usually a bad scenario in the ending, where you wind up in Zugzwang type position. Game continued. Queen B5 by Kramnik, and now with the king protected with the bishop on F8, now Ivanchuck can journey in to the king side. So now he's looking for another weakness to attack. So he decides on this pawn on F2 with ideas of coming here with the knight to D3. This pushes Kramnik to some passivity here and defending. And now Queen E4. So now the king can't even move away from the G2 square because the knight will be kidnapped. So Queen E1 now offering a trade of queens. Ivanchuck just plays F6 because he knows that for white to trade the queens, it would be just unfavorable for him, because he would drop a piece. So after queen takes E4, D takes E4, now the knight is threatened and the bishop is threatened. So F6 and bishop C7. Notice also how black slowly deals with white's ideas. Remember, I was showing you how in the beginning how white, in the games that he won, always had that nice king side flow going, that king side attack, and the utilization of the E5 square is very important in that objective. And you see black finally consolidate the position, and now he takes over important E5 square. His queen centralized in the middle of the board. Alright, again, he's all set to put more pressure on this. Oops, not like that. So the knight can come here, knight here. There's a lot of options for black. So he chooses knight C2 with the real straightforward attack on the pawn here. He could try to defend with a move like queen D1, try to keep pawns on the board. That's possible. However, Kramnik decided to go into this ending. So queen takes E4, D takes E4, knight D2, hoping to exchange pawns, and Kramnik is really hoping for a draw here. Ivanchuck does the right thing. He protects the pawn, meanwhile maintaining the threat. Knight B3, knight E1, fantastic move. Planning on just putting the knight on a beautiful outpost right there and maintaining the attack against his pawn. King E2. And now it's safe. Ivanchuck's king is going to join the fight. It's B4. Powerful move here. King E3. Ivanchuck plays the move king e8. Bishop c5. Of course, you really don't want to take that, so he just puts more pressure on the weakness. Bishop a3. King f7. And I must say at this time too, the players were kind of getting a little low on time, so some of the moves aren't optical. I'm not gonna really get into that. Bishop d6. King f6. Bishop c5. King e7. Bishop b8. So we see Kramnik in hold mode right here. Bishop b2. And of course, we see this bishop sliding back and forth because the king wants to cross over. And so the idea is to keep the king from crossing over. So bishop f4, king d8, bishop d6, king d7, and now bishop f8. And this was Kramnik's idea, is that, hey, when he tries to cross over, he'll be able to pick this pawn up. King c6. So Ivanchuck has probably thought about it, and say, you know what, you can have that g pawn, but now my king is going to get to a dominating position. This is what happens. Bishop takes g7, king d5, bishop f6. So now white is holding this pawn, but his pieces are all passive. Like the knight can't go anywhere, the bishop can't go anywhere, and the king is stuck. However, the amount of attackers and defenders are even. So what do you do here? You know? So now you look for Zugzwang positions. So bishop c3 is played. With that in mind. King e2. Right? Because what else? For instance, if, let's say the bishop just dropped back to g7, then king c4. So it's hard to deal with that threat. If Ivanchuck had played king c7, king c4 move before, then knight a5 check would be uncomfortable for Ivanchuck. This is why he plays this move, bishop c3. Again, idea is make sure there's no counterplay in the position. He just kills the, this is where you really got to dig deep and look at all the possible ideas of counterplay. Like, what can white do to generate like any type of play? Because he's pretty much lost here. So you just want to look for like tricks and tactics and then shut those ideas down. So bishop c3 is one of them. Instead of just trying to race in with the king, he said, wait a minute, if I go the king here, he could check and blah blah blah. So he said, you know what, let me just put my bishop here. King e2, and now king c4. Right, knight c5. See, now the position start breaking down. So e5, and now what? This move e5 undermines this knight being on c5. So for example, if d takes e5, then the knight just falls. Can't go out like that, right? Now you can see it. And that doesn't work. So this is why Kramnik played the move knight d7. Let me just show you this variation doesn't work also. You should be able to see this as bishop takes e5. That's simply knight takes e5. Right, even bishop d4 works. It all works. So e5 deserves an exclamation mark. That's good move. So knight d7. And e takes d4. So Kramnik is dead lost at this moment. But he keeps fighting because, like I said, both players are in considerable time trouble. And sometimes Ivanchuck makes blunders in time trouble situations, and he's done this throughout the years on several occasions. So you can see why Kramnik would try to play on. So D3, King D1, Bishop D4. I didn't see attack on the F2 pawn. Bishop F6. Bishop takes B6, knight takes B6. Now King D4. Knight C8. And you always got to be careful in these type of positions. Even though you're pawn up, you know, Kramnik is looking for draw opportunities. Right? And even though his position is busted, you know, it's possible to mess this up if you're black, especially with 1 or 2 minutes on the clock. So knight E5. Knight E7. And now knight G4 attacking the F2 pawn. Idea being that if knight takes G6, knight takes F2 check, and these two passers are going to queen before this one can even think about it. Therefore, King E1. King C3 was played. King C4, you know, again, not to be overly critical, King C4 does prevent knight D5 from happening. So it's a little bit stronger. However, King C3 was played, knight D5. Nice move, King B3. If King C2, then knight B4. Again, black is still winning, but just avoiding the harassment there. So King B3, King D2. So now he has to give up another pawn. And now here's some street hustling tactics by Kramnik, trying to get create some distractions. So G takes H5, and now knight E3. And then, of course, Ivanchuck finds a great move. This move actually wins also. He played H4 there, which is excellent. This move wins too. Knight G4 is real simple and plain. So for instance, knight takes F5. Then simply knight E5. And with the idea of driving the king back after knight C4. And then if he anticipates and tries to move himself, then you just do that. Knight E3, knight C4. Knight D4, king D4. And then the next move is going to be good old E3. So that's another way. But I like the move in the game. This is when I was watching them play. That's a move that popped in my mind real quick, is H4. Because he really can't afford to take this pawn. Because that would free up black's central pawn majority. It's just too much. For instance, knight F1, E3. Notice how the knight is guarding D3. And so all he can really do is give up the knight. And black has a beautiful resource right there. He could give up this knight, of course. And this pawn is going to queen. So after H4, this explains why Kramnik played knight takes F5. Okay, but then Ivanchuck just finished off matters with H3. And there's really no stopping that pawn. Okay, for instance, G4 is just meant by knight takes G4. And so Kramnik resigned, and that ends Kramnik's run at the Fide World Cup. So I know that video was kind of long, so I'll end it right here. I hope you enjoyed that. Questions, comments, suggestions, all welcome. And I also hope you learned something. And You know, if this videos have, you know, been good for you, you know, please, you know, donate if you can. I would appreciate it very much. Okay, I'll see you guys on the next video.